You could look at the sort of glass half full argument and say, my goodness, with all these people on Twitter and all these reporters, in the 24-hour news cycle, that if a big story began to emerge, it would never be two lonely guys pursuing it forever, because, the entire pack of the cyber universe would, bay like wolves after the White House until it happened.
They used to say a reporter was only good as his phone numbers. We can hunt and stalk sources so many different ways. The toolbox that I have available to me as a reporter, digital voice recording, email, social media. We can truth tell them in real time. When they say something, we can be Googling what they're saying, playing back to them. We have access to all known thought, one click away. Ability to surround and ferret out source in a way that Woodward and Bernstein only dreamed of.
The internet is a tool, just like a typewriter is a tool, telephone is a tool. At the end of the day, journalism requires incredibly dogged persistence on the part of journalists who are seeking the truth.
We worked over here.
I'm here,
you're here, and I'm here.
Yeah. And it was the noise of typewriters, and it was the smoke of people who smoked.
People smoking.
38 years ago. Why do things have to change?
That's right.
Every day, Bob and I would go have a cup of coffee together in the morning in a little vending machine room off the newsroom.
It sure is quiet in here.
And on this particular day, not that long after the break-in, I put a dime in the coffee machine, which is what it cost then, and I literally felt this chill go down my neck. I mean, literally. Made my hair stick up, I think. And I turned to Woodward and I said, oh my God, this president is going to be impeached. And Woodward looked at me and he said, oh my God, you're right.
I would like to add a personal word with regard to an issue that has been of great concern to all Americans over the past year. I refer, of course, to the investigations of the so-called Watergate affair. I believe the time has come to bring that investigation and the other investigations of this matter to an end. 1 year of Watergate is enough.
But as hard as Nixon tried, Watergate would not go away.
The meeting will come to order. Resolved that the Committee on the Judiciary is authorized and directed to investigate fully and completely whether sufficient grounds exist to impeach Richard M. Nixon, President of the United States of America.
It took the American people to force Congress into action. This was not like what happened with President Clinton, where a special prosecutor said you should do an impeachment. There were those of us in Congress who wanted to take action, but the powers that be refused. It was only when the American people broke down that wall of resistance and said, you've got to do what you can do under the Constitution to rein in the imperial president.
The American people were losing patience. And the Congressional Committee was furious. They knew they had only scratched the surface. There were thousands of hours of recordings, but Nixon was refusing to release any of them.
President Nixon today defied subpoenas demanding that he produce tapes and papers in his possession, and the country moved closer to a clash between the White House and the Congress and the courts, which will be unprecedented in American history.
It became clear he wasn't going to produce them voluntarily. But there's a reason why he's drawing the line. He's taking all this flack. There must be some damaging things on there. I was concerned, we were concerned that he might dispose of the tapes. I mean, that in and of itself could be a criminal offense. Burning of the tapes, destroying the tapes.
Nixon never thought the tapes that he was making secretly would ever surface publicly. They would always be for his private use.
It was never designed that they would come out, so there's a kind of spontaneity and free flow of people talking about their authentic conclusions, and it's horrifying.
President, you've made it perfectly clear you don't intend to release those tapes. Perfectly clear? Perfectly clear.
It would be up to the Supreme Court to make the decision. On July 24th, 1974, the court issued its ruling.
Good morning. The Supreme Court has just ruled on the tapes controversy, and here's Carl's turn, who has that ruling. It is a unanimous decision, Doug, 8-0. Justice Rehnquist took no part in the decision ordering the President of the United States to turn over the tapes. So
the court voted unanimously to require the tapes to be released. Some of those members of the court had been appointed by Richard Nixon himself. So you had the court system acting in a nonpartisan way, in a credible way, regardless of politics.
Imagine that in the politicized Supreme Court that we've had in our recent history.
While Nixon tried to put on the pretend act that operations were going on as normal, they weren't. They were disintegrating every day.
3 days after the Supreme Court ruling, the House of Representatives took the step most dreaded by the president: impeachment. Nixon's fate now rested in the hands of the committee.
Today I am an inquisitor, and hyperbole would not be fictional and would not overstate the solemnness that I feel right now. My faith in the Constitution is whole, it is complete, it is total. And I am not going to sit here and be an idle spectator to the diminution, the subversion, the destruction of the Constitution.
Mr. Hungate. Aye. Mr. Conyers.
Aye. Some Republicans who voted for the impeachment, some Democrats who voted for impeachment, they were putting their political lives on the line. And all of us were putting our reputations on the line.
Ms. Holtzman.
We voted on the impeachment. It was one of the most sober and solemn moments in my life, and I think in the life of everybody on that committee. Everybody understood the stakes for the country. That's what this was all about. And it was above party.
Mr. Smith.
It was what was good for America and what our democracy required.
Mr. Railsback.
It was the Republicans that ultimately provided a real measure of putting country ahead of party.
Nixon held his ground. He insisted he knew nothing of the cover-up. But among the thousands of hours of tapes, one conversation recorded shortly after the break-in would destroy what was left of his credibility and his presidency.
Now, on the investigation, the Democratic break-in thing, we're back in the problem area because the FBI is not under control, and their investigation is now leading into some productive areas.
What finally catches him is when the tapes are released. The smoking gun tape puts the lie to the statement that he had no advance knowledge.
On the tape, you hear Nixon telling Haldeman to direct the CIA to stop an FBI investigation.
Without going into the details, don't lie to them to the extent to say that there's no involvement. But you say this is sort of a comedy of errors, and that they should call the FBI in so that they don't go any further into this case, period.
Those words clearly led to an obstruction of justice.
And I was always amazed at the president's nonchalance. He didn't seem to care. I wanted to say to him, my God, man, do you know what you just said? Do you know those tapes are rolling?
After the smoking gun tape came out, the president lost all support, Republican as well as Democrat. Republicans went to him and said, you have to resign. We cannot support you anymore.
It was Republicans, finally, who made sure that Nixon had to leave office. Barry Goldwater marching down to the White House.
So we sat there in the Oval Room, and the president acted like he just played golf and just had a hole-in-one. You'd never think this guy's tail was in a crack.
Nixon said, how many votes if I'm impeached in the House? How many votes in the Senate? About 20. And Goldwater said,
very few and not mine.
The 37th President of the United States was facing the ultimate disgrace. For a man who craved power, the question was, Would Nixon continue to fight? I don't remember exactly where I was or what I was doing the night Nixon resigned, but I remember the feeling. Relief.
Okay. Hey, you're better looking than I am. Why don't you stay here? Blondes, they say, photograph better than brunettes.
We are standing by now for President Richard Milhouse Nixon, 37th President of the United States.
Have you got an extra camera in case the lights go out? Who'd you get it from? Is that an NBC? Let me see. Did you get these lights properly? Yes, my eyes always have. You'll find if you get just past 60, that's enough.
In just a moment now, the President of the United States will begin his speech, perhaps his last speech from the White House.
Good evening.
We watched him sitting on the floor eating bologna sandwiches and having a sense of unreality, quite frankly.
From the discussions I have had with congressional and other leaders, I have concluded that because of the Watergate matter, I might not have the support of the Congress that I would consider necessary to back the very difficult decisions and carry out the duties of this office in the way the interests of the nation will require.
I was just awestruck at the whole thing. No gloating, very little sense of self. It was really about the magnificence of what had occurred in terms of the right thing.
Therefore, I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow. Vice President Ford will be sworn in as president at that hour in this office.
Our first reaction really was, okay, he's not president anymore. He's just a citizen. Now we can indict him. Honestly, that is what we thought.
Earlier today, the East Room of the White House was the scene of an emotional meeting between the president, his cabinet, and the aides who have stayed with him during all of these years of Mr. Nixon's tenure in the White House.
You have this president who is bitterly resentful of what had happened to him in his political career, overlaid with a Shakespearean level of paranoia. And he was willing to engage in extraordinary acts to preserve his power.